Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be doing my picks for the first week of the summer stage qualifiers for the 2023 season of the Overwatch League. There are a lot of games to go over, tons of matches to be played, with all of the teams in the Eastern and Western region playing games this weekend. So full slate, 4 days worth of games. So let's not dilly-dally. Let's jump in and let's talk about these matches, starting with the first one, which is the first game on Thursday, the first game back, the Florida Mayhem taking on the Houston Outlaws. Two teams that did very, very well in the spring series. It's an interesting matchup, obviously. Much better look for the Outlaws there in that Midseason Madness tournament. They got second place overall. Mayhem got third overall. So two teams that did very, very well. I think this game should be pretty good. I don't know exactly what to expect from the meta. Neither of these teams made many major changes, however. So I think pretty much the match should go a similar way to what it did last time they played, which was a win for the Houston Outlaws by a score of 3-1. I'm going to say the same thing happens. I don't think it's necessarily a guarantee, but to me, it seems like a pretty solid guess that something similar will happen. Up next, we have the Atlanta Reign, the defending Midseason Madness champions, taking on the London Spitfire. To me, even though the meta seemingly is going to be a little bit different, we don't know, like I said, exactly if it'll be Winston heavy, if it'll be Ramatra heavy. The meta will be different. The Reign were so dominant in that Midseason Madness and in the spring stage that I don't really think anyone can touch them, especially not the Spitfire. So I think this will be a pretty one-sided affair, 3-0 for the Atlanta Reign. They just look better right now. They've been the best team for a while now, and so hard for me to say anything but them taking the dub. Next game is an interesting one to me, and that is the LA Gladiators taking on the San Francisco Shock. Two teams that are kind of on opposite trajectories. The Gladiators just made that big move, dropping Dante and signing Marvel, which they seemingly hope will be the thing that kind of reinvigorates their season. The Shock, we know they no longer have Hee-Sang on the roster. We don't really know what their full roster is going to look like going forward. They haven't really announced anything other than Hee-Sang being gone as of me recording this video, so there are a lot of question marks around the Shock. I think it's a very tough team to kind of gauge. There's rumors and stuff about what their team could be, but nothing really set in stone right now outside of Hee-Sang no longer being with the team. Although the Gladiators were a better team in the first half of the year, I think with the addition of Marvel, they should be an even better team. And so I'm going to say it's a pretty one-sided 3-0 win for the Gladiators over the Shock. I think they look too good right now. I think they look like one of the best teams in the region. And the Shock are still a little too middling for my taste to feel comfortable in them taking this one. So give me the Glads in this one. Up next, we have the first game in the APAC region back, which is the Guangzhou Charge, taking on O2 Blast. Of course, one of the 4 contenders teams that will be competing in the summer stage for this go-around. O2 Blast were one of the top, if not the, well, they were the top contenders team, arguably, in the world going into the spring stage and going into the spring knockouts, but their entire roster has been basically just poked at and poached, and basically the entire team is gone. They do have a player, Prophet, who was formerly for the Seoul Dynasty, not the one who has been in the league forever, but the one who was a rookie. Left O2 Blast to join Dynasty and is now back on O2 Blast. Other than that, every other player in this team, as far as I'm aware, is a brand new player who has not been on this roster before. It is basically building blocks, a new team, and the Charge had a very, very good run to start the spring stage. Yes, they missed out on making it all the way, but they were very, very good. I still think they're going to be one of the best teams in the region. To me, this is a pretty easy 3-0 for them. They just look better. They should be better. They have more things going for them, I think, and so to me, Charge are the clear favorites in this matchup. Up next, we have my first big pick game of the week, which is the Seoul Infernal versus the Hangzhou Spark. The two teams that I put at the top of my Eastern region power rankings, going into the summer stage. It's an interesting matchup because I think both these teams are kind of on weird fields. Obviously, last time they played in the spring stage, it was the Seoul Infernal who walked away with the victory. Though, you would argue, or many people would argue, that the Seoul Infernal did not have the best showing in the Midseason Madness, and the Spark actually had the better showing of the two teams. Up to you. It's pretty close, I think, ultimately. The Spark made some changes in the break in between the spring stage and summer stage, obviously getting rid of 20 and Rui, the head coach, leaving, and they brought in Pineapple as a flex support, a second flex support, and obviously they had to make a coaching change. They promoted Creed to their head coaching role, who had been an assistant coach. So it's tough to pick this one, I think, because in my mind, the Spark should be able to win, but I just don't know if they have it in them right now. And so I think the Infernal will take this one, because I think just based on where the trajectory is right now of these two teams, the Spark have a very tough week this weekend. They did not get lucky. They have no contenders matchups this week. They play the two best teams, arguably, in the region outside of themselves. And I think that they're going to have to drop one of them. I think the Infernal game is more likely, so I think 3-1 for the Infernal over the Spark here in this one. Next game we have is the Seoul Dynasty taking on the Shanghai Dragons. The only win the Dragons have this season, including the Midseason Madness, is over the Seoul Dynasty. Dynasty, pretty rough showing at times in the first half of the year, though they made some pretty noticeable changes, bringing in EasyHan and dropping Profit. Once again, not the GOAT OG Profit, who was with London back in 2018. He's still on the team, and he is still the center of the team, but they brought in EasyHan to kind of give them a little more flexibility in that damage lineup, while the Dragons moved away from Fleta as tank and brought in Fate as their tank. So both of these teams made changes that helped them out. I think this game should be pretty close. I think it'll be a pretty interesting one to watch. But I really like the addition for Fate for the Dragons. I think they've looked really, really good in the damage duo in particular this season. I don't love their supports. I don't love the Gangnam Jin Iris duo, but I also don't love the Krillin Lee Min duo. But at least with Gangnam Jin and Iris, you have players who've been in much bigger moments more consistently throughout their careers. And so I would give the edge there to the Dragons. Plus, in terms of coaching, I'd give the edge to the Dragons. I think there's a decently similar matchup here in terms of talent, but I think coaching, you have to go the way of the Dragons, experience to go the way of the Dragons, and you just look at the fact that the Dragons won already in their matchup earlier in the season. I do think the Dragons take this one. I think it'll be close. I think a 3-2 is the scoreline of this one, but I just feel better about the Dragons right now, and I think that they will walk away from this one as the victors. Up next, we have the New York Excelsior taking on the Vegas Eternal. Vegas obviously made some changes to their team, bringing in some new players, some players that are going to be playing on high ping as we go into the second half of the season. Notable names like 2U, of course, who was in the Overwatch League for a time, as well as Knife, and someone else who I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But they made some changes to try to improve their roster, and I think their roster will be better based on the changes that they made. Irony, of course, the other player. How could I forget? Irony. But I think the biggest problem for Vegas is going to be playing on high ping with players who don't have a ton of history playing on these mixed rosters. Both, my understanding, both Rack Attack and Dove don't have that history playing on mixed rosters, and neither really do 2U or Knife. Irony is a little bit, but not a ton. New York signed OG, replacing both Lep and Halo, so it's an interesting matchup. I think these are two teams in weird spots. New York had a much better first half of the year. I think they should still be a pretty solid team overall. But Vegas, I think their improvements should at least give them a fighting chance in this one. I am going to go on the side of New York. I think they're the better team right now, but I think it's going to be 3-1. I don't think it's going to be super dominant because I don't really think New York is a dominant team, and I think Vegas' improvements will help them out. But ultimately, I do think New York is the better team, and they should walk away from this one with the win. Up next, we have the battle for LA, the LA Gladiators versus the LA Valiant, a matchup we have not seen in several years now. It has been several years since one of the oldest rivalries in the Overwatch League, once the greatest rivalry potentially in Overwatch League, now a shell of its former self. There's some talent on this in this rivalry, of course. Seeker on the Valiant, All these players in the Gladiators have been very, very good so far this season. So we'll see what happens, but I think you have to favor the Gladiators pretty heavily in this one. They look a lot better. They've had the better run. Valiant are one of the worst teams in the season. They haven't won a game yet. So to me, pretty obvious win for the Gladiators here. I'm going to say a 3-0 for them. Not really going to sugarcoat it. The Valiant have not been good. They have had a lot of time off, so they maybe have spent some time kind of really working on their teamwork and getting their team up to where they should try to be. But right now, I just feel like you have to go with the Gladiators in a pretty convincing fashion in this one. Up next, we have the San Francisco Shock taking on the Washington Justice. Justice made a change, of course, bringing in Donghoon, I believe, to replace FD God on this roster. So pretty notable change there. Shock, like I said, there will be changes to this roster. I'm sure we just haven't seen them all yet. Justice dominated the Shock last time they played, and I don't think they were playing at their best when that happened. I think they look better now. I think with Donghoon, they should be a better team. Like I said about Shock, I don't know what to expect from them. I really don't know what their team is. It's hard for me to really kind of feel good about them based on what we've seen so far. I like the Justice. They've been pretty consistently good. And so I'm going to give them the win here. And I'm going to say it's going to be a 3-0 win for the Justice. I just do not have a lot of faith right now in this Shock roster. And so to me, Justice walk away from this one in a relatively dominant fashion over the Shock. Next, we have another great rivalry game, the Summer Zhoudown, as I'm calling it. Guangzhou Charge versus Hangzhou Spark. They have split their matchup so far this season. The regular season matchup went the way of the Charge. Their tournament matchup went the way of the Spark. So very good rivalry here. Like I said, Spark have a tough week. They have to play two really, really, really good teams this week. The two best teams in the group that are not them. Charge are going to be coming off a game against O2 Blast that I think should be relatively easy. So these teams are kind of coming in different places. Spark are going to come in having fought a pretty tough battle against the Infernal. Charge, in my opinion, coming in on a pretty easy route. I think this will be a pretty good matchup. I think it'll be relatively close. It was close last time they played. And so I feel like you have to at least predict some kind of element of closeness in this game. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. But I feel like the Spark right now are the better team. They're a little bit more complete. If Winston is the meta that we see, you just have to feel really good about Gushui, what he can do. And I think they kind of figured out later on in the first half of the season really where they want to put Leave and Shy to get the most value out of those two players. So I think the Spark should win, even with the kind of changes to their roster. I think it'll be close. It's going to be a 3-2, but I do think ultimately when you look at where these teams are, I think the Spark right now are just a little bit better, and so I'm going to give them the edge there. Up next, we have the Dallas Fuel taking on Poker Face. Pretty good contenders team in Poker Face. A lot of former Owl guys on that team. Dallas Fuel, of course, defending champs. They're pretty good. Of course, they do have some limitations in terms of flexibility and all that type of stuff, but you look at their roster at their best when you have players like Hanbin and Sparkle and Edison playing at their best. You're a pretty good team. And I think that their supports, when they play well, they can hold their own against a lot of the top-level lines in this Eastern region. And so I think Dallas Fuel should be favored. I think they are the better team here. I like Poker Face. I don't think they're a bad team by any means. I think that they will challenge the Fuel a bit. I think the Fuel are just a little bit too good, and they're a little bit too dominant against some of these weaker teams. Their win against the O2 Blast roster in the Midseason Madness was very impressive. That O2 Blast team was very, very good. I don't think this Poker Face team is as good as that team was, so I'm going to give the Fuel a win 3-1. I'm giving Poker Face a map because I like their team. I think they have good players, and I think that when we see them play well, they could definitely make a bit of a dent, but I just don't think that they have what it takes right now to beat a very good Dallas Fuel roster. Up next, we have the Seoul Dynasty taking on Panthera. I think Panthera is one of the weaker teams in this group and in this region. I just don't think they have a ton of really great talent. I think after losing Fate and Iris early in the season, I think they kind of dipped below where I really, really liked this team. They have some good players on this roster, but they didn't have a great performance, all things considered, in the Midseason Madness. They were fine. They had to face O2 Blast, and that's a hard sell to try to beat them. But I just think when you look at where these teams are, I think the Dynasty improved enough in the offseason, or in the break between the stages, that I feel like they're just better right now. I think they should be better. Dynasty didn't really struggle against many contenders teams. The only one they lost to was Dreamers, who had a very, very good run. So there's nothing really to be ashamed of there. So I think this Dynasty roster looks better than it did. I think they should win. I think they should win pretty convincingly, honestly. I have them taking this one by a score of 3-0. I just don't think Panthera has the high enough levels to really beat a Dynasty team that I just think right now looks pretty good. And all things considered, I think they should be victorious over this Panthera roster. Next, we move on to the final APAC game on Friday, and that is between Dreamers and the Shanghai Dragons. I think Dreamers are the best looking team from contenders right now. I think the Shanghai Dragons are one of the lower level Overwatch League teams in this region, but even then, I still think the Dragons are the better looking team. I cannot stress enough how much I think this addition of Fate will boost this roster a ton. They will be a much better team with him on this roster. I think that they have a lot of really good players here. Dreamers lost a couple too many pieces for me to think that they have what it takes to really compete right now with teams in this region. Maybe as things go on, we see how good they are. Maybe that will change, but I think the Dragons right now look better. I'm going to give them the win by a score of 3-1. I'm just a little bit more impressed by them so far, and I think they right now are the better team of the two, and so they are the team that I think is going to win here and close out the Saturday games in the Eastern region, not the Friday games. Moving on now, we have the battle for the North, if you will. The game between the Toronto Defiant and the Vancouver Titans. A matchup that I honestly kind of think will not be a great matchup. Defiant, with the additions of Opener and Spectra, should look a lot better. Vancouver Titans just announced yesterday that they acquired Heesang from the Shock. I don't really like that move. I think that it does not really help this team get to the point where they really want to be as a roster. I think they miss a lot of the benefits of having a player like, a good hit scan player on this roster, and then they just kind of lose out on that with what they have. They have too many kind of things that overlap with Sugar Free and Heesang. I just think it's a great signing. So to me, the Defiant should be better right now. I think their moves in the break were much better than the Titans. Obviously, the Titans' moves were not necessarily the moves they wanted to make, moves that they had to make, and realistically should have made a long time ago. And so, to me, I have to give this one to the Defiant. I think they just look better right now. I think that their overall kind of roster right now is just a stronger-looking roster, and I think they're going to take this one. I'm going to say a score of 3-1. I think the Titans are good enough to push them a little bit, but I think the Defiant made the right moves to kind of get the roster where you want it. Going into the second half of the season, I think they take this one over the Vancouver Titans. Up next is the Atlanta Reign taking on the Washington Justice. Two good teams. The Atlanta Reign, of course, best team in the league. Washington Justice, a respectable team. I think they'll be pretty good, but I don't think they have what it takes to beat the Reign right now. The Reign seem untouchable. Until someone beats them, there's no reason to predict against them, so give me the 3-0 for the Reign over the Justice. Nothing against the Justice, it's just the Reign are that good, and right now, it doesn't really seem like anyone's going to touch them, so give me them in this one. Next is the second and final big pick for the week, which is the Boston Uprising taking on the Houston Outlaws. I think it's a really good matchup. I really like both of these teams. I think Houston, of course, is the second best team in the league right now. But it's pretty cool to see this matchup again after seeing it in the Midseason Madness. Did not go the way I hoped it would. It was not very close when they played last time around. Boston did release Striker, and it doesn't seem like they are making any move to add a flex DPS player, which I think they need to. I think it's the biggest weakness for the team. I think it's the thing that's going to keep holding them back from being able to really contend. I wish they would have gone after Heesang instead of Vancouver. But I still think they're a very good team. I think they're respectable. I think that we're going to see them continue to improve as we get into the second half of the season. And I think they will have a bit of a better performance against Houston than they did last time. So I'm going to give them a map in this one. I'm going to say a 3-1 victory for the Outlaws over the Uprising. Respectable matchup, I think. I think it's a good game, but I do think the Outlaws are just a little bit too good right now for me to think that the Uprising have what it takes to find a very nice and potentially much needed win against one of these higher level teams. Moving on to the final match on Saturday, we have the New York Excelsior taking on the London Spitfire. This is a tough one for me to pick because I think when you look at these teams and where they are, depending on what the meta is, it could be really close. It could be one-sided. It's difficult to really kind of say for sure. I like New York a lot. I like the addition of OG. I don't think it's necessarily a huge upgrade, if really a one at all, as some people might tell you from Lep and Halo. But I think that he provides a little bit more kind of stability in that back line. He's not the best, but I think that there's a chance that with OG, you're going to have a less moving over of Fitz. Maybe not. Maybe we see a lot more Fitz playing flex support. Even if he does, he will have a little bit more time to kind of prepare for it. So we'll see how it looks. I think it'll be good. I think it'll be a close match. I think it'll be a 3-2 game. But I'm going to go in favor of New York for now because I think that they just had a better opening half to the season. And I feel like it's hard to predict against them right now based on what we've seen from them. But like I said, I think it'll be close. I think it'll be a good matchup. But I go just a little bit more in favor of New York for this one. Up next, we have the Dallas Fuel taking on O2 Blast. I mentioned it before. Dallas had that big win over O2 Blast in the Midseason Madness, or the whatever it was, the summer stage knockouts. Kind of a shocker. A lot of people thought O2 Blast would win that game, but Dallas won it pretty convincingly. This new O2 Blast roster, not particularly great. Much different roster, so I think this will be a pretty one-sided affair for the Dallas Fuel. 3-0. I don't think they're going to lose to a newly built contenders roster. Yeah, I think the Fuel should be the favorites and pretty heavily so in this matchup. Up next, we have another Contenders Overwatch League matchup. Seoul Infernal taking on Poker Face. Similar result. I think this will be another one-sided affair. I think the Infernal are the better team here. I think Poker Face are good. They're arguably the best Contenders team right now. It's between them and Dreamers, in my opinion. But the Infernal, to me, are another step above. They are a better roster. They are a better built team. They have looked a lot better than Poker Face has. There's a reason why Contenders players rank Contenders usually. And so for me, give me the Infernal in a 3-0 win over Poker Face. Maybe Poker Face makes it interesting. Maybe they take a map or two and make it fun. But I just don't see the Infernal dropping the series to Poker Face. Final APAC match of the week is Dreamers versus Panthera. Interesting matchup, to say the least. Two teams in kind of interesting spots here. They both kind of lost some of their key pieces from the first half of the season, so where they go from here will be fun to see. And these are two Contenders teams matching up in an Overwatch League match, which is fun. I think, generally speaking, that the Dreamers roster looks to be a bit better than Panthera. I don't think it's super far apart, honestly. Panthera kind of underwhelmed me in the first half of the season anyway. Dreamers exceeded my expectations. Losing a lot of their good pieces does hurt their chances, I think, at kind of repeating that same level of success. But I think they do look better than Panthera right now, and so I think Dreamers takes this one by a score of 3-1. Relatively close, I think. I don't think it's going to be super one-sided, because I don't really think either of these teams are exceptional or that much better than the other. But it'll be an interesting matchup. It'll be fun to see kind of how they compare after seeing them play against some Overwatch League teams earlier in the week. Moving on to the Western region, the final few games here, we have the Florida Mayhem versus the Vancouver Titans. I like the Mayhem way more than Titans right now. The Mayhem looked very good in the first half of the season, and I think that they will continue much of that success into the second half, especially against the Titans team that I just don't think look great right now. Give me a 3-0 win for the Mayhem over the Titans. I just don't think there's a lot riding on the Titans right now. I think they have way too much going on in that team to feel like they have the potential to get a big win here, so give me the Mayhem here. Next is the Boston Uprising taking on the Vegas Eternal. Another pretty one-sided affair, in my opinion. Boston, the better team here. They should win this game with ease over a pretty lackluster Vegas team. Like I said, they made changes. They should be better, but I don't think it's enough. I think Boston takes this one by a score of 3-0. They shouldn't drop a map to a Vegas team that has one map win all season. So, Boston, you're my pick to pretty much roll over Vegas in this one. And then the final game of the week is the Toronto Defiant taking on the LA Valiant. I think this one could be interesting. I want to see what the Valiant have cooking up after being away for a very long time. They didn't play the final week of the qualifiers in the summer stage, or in the spring stage, and of course didn't make it to the Midseason Madness or the knockouts. So we haven't seen them play in like a month and a half. We've not seen them play in a while. So really, we don't know what to expect from this team. They could have improved a lot. They could also look bad. We really have nothing to go off of here. So it'll be interesting to see where they are, but I don't think they should be better than a Defiant team that looks much improved. And though they've struggled, I think they should still be able to beat the Valiant with relative ease. So I'm going to say 3-0 for the Defiant over the LA Valiant. And that is the final pick for this weekend. I will throw them up for you. You can see all of them. You can pause and take a look if you want to see all of my picks this weekend. Tons of games this weekend. It'll be a lot to break down and cover on Monday. So for now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed and want more like it in the future, consider liking and subscribing, as your support does help out a bunch with the channel. See you on Monday to break some of these games down. And of course, we'll see where all these rosters are actually at when the games kick off tomorrow. That's going to be all from me for today. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.